Finished up my new filing jig today. Wanted to show the old jig that we'd previously done a video on and some of the modifications that I made that are more suitable for the knives that I make and give me a little more versatility in the knives that we're doing. The old jig had two series of holes that you could set your pin bearing up in, and then also run bolts to trap the tang of the knife as well as something behind the spine of the knife while you're filing. The new jig, I've added in more holes to give myself more options as I go, a little closer to the edge than the previous one was. Had requests to make some thinner knives, and on the old jig found that when I brought this in and trapped it up against my pin bearing, that I was digging into the jig a lot and it was making it really hard to get all the way to the point with my grind. So on the new one, I went ahead and drilled a little bit closer to the edge. These are set up on 1/2 inch increments, so it's a 1/2 inch, inch and a half off the edge, so that when I move this pin bearing down, it's actually pushing the edge of the knife off of the jig and allowing me to get to that point a lot easier, allowing me to access that and get a good grind. One thing I had to do though, I had to put a piece of 5/4 underneath the front lip here to beef it up a little bit, so that when I am screwing down in and securing everything, I'm not just going through the particle board, I'm actually getting into some actual solid wood. The threads will last a lot longer, and it lets me go a little bit tighter and get things secured down. So that's one of the changes I made. Just drilled a bunch more holes in series so that I'd have options. The old jig for establishing the height of your grind had a series of holes that I could screw an eye bolt up and down and move it back across the board as I went up. Worked really well for the knives. I found that I actually didn't use hardly any of these holes. I got to where I was only using probably 3 out of all of them. Figured I don't need that many holes drilled in if I'm not going to use them. And also screwing this eye bolt up and down, going through the wood itself. Sometimes when you get down in there, you have to actually get a screwdriver in there and move it around. It's just hard to screw up and down. So the change I made was I took, this is a 5/16 coupler nut, but what I did is I got 3/8 coupler nuts, drilled holes big enough to drive those down in and glue them in place, so that my 3/8 inch eye bolt now just slides on those metal threads, and I drilled the hole big enough underneath so it just goes all the way down, and it's a lot easier for me to thread up and down. And also it tracks with the file better, as it allows the bolt to move as I'm moving across the blade with me, instead of getting bound up there at any point. I didn't drill as many holes. I found that I really don't need them, as I find the middle of my middle line there as I'm grinding. All I have to do is lower this one down. If it gets to a point where that won't work anymore, all I got to do is go back. This first one's at 10 inches, the second one's at 15, so that gives me a pretty good jump back for when I want to go a little higher on my grind. All I got to do is unscrew this, which is much easier coming out of those metal threads than it was coming out of the wood, and then just move it to the back one here, and down it goes. So I think it's going to work a lot better for what I'm doing. Probably the biggest improvement that I made so far is the old jig was originally set up to go in a bench vise. So it has a 2x4 underneath, so you could screw your vise out, clamp it in. I never used the vise because everybody else in the garage that was making knives wanted to use it as well. So I found that I actually just screwed it down to my surface, which cost me a lot of work surface area when I wanted to do other things. So I made the jig considerably longer than this one. I ripped the back edge off, put 2 hinges on, so now when I'm ready to work or use this as a work surface, it'll fold up and out of the way, sits there, and I'm back to having my entire work surface here to sand or work on scales or whatever I want to do. When I'm ready to start filing on a knife, just all I got to do is drop it down and everything looks good. Not really any wiggle room in there. Pretty decent hinges, so it's not going to move. The only thing I want to do is add a cleat underneath here on the edge, so that when it does come down, that cleat goes right over the edge and really pinches that on and makes it nice and secure. Any questions about this, let me know. When I post the video, I will go ahead and put in the description the sizes of bolts and everything that I use. One other thing though, this is a 5/16 coupling nut. That's what I use for what I use is a pin bearing. I basically thread it on a 5/16 bolt and run it on my belt sander until I knock all those edges off. This allows my file to glide back and forth on there real smooth instead of the edge of the file digging in and basically wearing through my bolt, because as you do that, it won't take but probably one knife to get a considerable groove, and every time you run your file against that, that groove gets deeper and deeper, and your plunge line will keep working its way back, and it's really hard to establish a good plunge line. So if you have some type of bearing so that that file can slide instead of digging in, it allows you to get a good deep plunge line without it working itself backwards across the knife. So any questions, let me know. Gonna get some knives cut out and probably do a couple videos on filing and how this all works. So appreciate you watching.